Hi, friends. Let's hear from the Gospel of Mark. Jesus came from Nazareth to the river Jordan to be baptized by his cousin John. Just as he was coming up out of the water, he saw the clouds ripped open and the Holy Spirit flew from heaven and landed on him like a dove. Then he heard his voice, this voice out of the clouds. "You, Jesus, are my son, and I love you very much. I am so very pleased with you. Don't forget that." Then the Spirit drove him right into the wilderness, beyond where anyone lived. He was there for 40 days and was tempted by Satan himself. But he wasn't alone. He was with the wild beasts who became his friends, and angels came to care for him when he was sore and tired and hungry. When he left the wilderness, he heard that John had been arrested for the things he was saying about the king. Jesus went to Galilee, where he was from, and he told people God's good news. "The time has finally come, people," Jesus said, "and God's kingdom is so very close and real. Turn in God's direction. Believe in God's good news." Jesus was full of the Spirit after his baptism and was whisked by the Spirit into the wilderness, having heard the voice of God at his baptism at the river. In the Gospel of Matthew's version, the voice says to the crowd, "This is my Son, the Beloved, with whom I am well pleased." But in the earlier Gospel versions, Luke and Mark, the voice from the clouds speaks directly to Jesus. "You are my beloved, and with you I am well pleased." How astounding that must have been to hear. Perhaps Jesus needed some time to absorb the meaning of those words. What do we know about those 40 days in the wilderness? Well, in this version of the story, we get very few details beyond these words: Spirit, wilderness, Satan, wild beasts, and finally angels. Jesus begins his time in the desert with the voice of God ringing in his ears, telling him exactly who he is, the beloved of God. And I'll bet the memory of being told he was beloved at his baptism, at the transfiguration, of being filled with the Spirit, was a resource he drew upon throughout his earthly ministry. Jesus spent some of his time in the desert being tempted, and some of his time praying. But perhaps he spent most of his time listening for God to speak again, making sense of the 30 years of his early human experience, waiting for direction, without distraction, without responsibility, without other people. Very few of us have the luxury of 40 days to remove ourselves from the responsibility and distractions to devote to exploring our interior selves. However, during the season of Lent, we are given permission to take some time, perhaps a little time on each of the 40 days, to listen for God's voice, to pay attention to whom God believes we are, and to wait for direction. As a community of faith, we have the same resources available to us as Jesus did during his Lenten journey. Words of prayer and worship, the quiet, the silence found between the words, the ancient stories of covenant and relationship, the expressions of identity and encouragement, direct from God from our baptisms, the care we receive from others, and angels surrounding us. Jesus carried with him all his life that voice he heard, "You are my beloved." It's the same voice which echoes in our baptism. Beloved is where we start the journey. As we enter into our Lenten season once again this year, I pray you find time to be quiet so that you can hear that voice, which tells you, "You are beloved. You are mine." Take the time to incorporate that into your life. Make it part of who you are, who you believe yourself to be. Ask God to help you discern which other voices are helpful and which would entice you away from the life God would have you lead. Reflect on the good and the bad which have brought you to this point in your life, which makes you who you are. And then be still. Ask God what God would have you keep and what God would have you discard. Ask God for direction and then listen for God's answer. It would be a shame to try to hurry through Lent. So don't rush. Slow down. Take the time necessary to do Lent well. Consider it a gift to be opened slowly, one day at a time for 40 days. Use the time to be honest with yourself about who you are, flawed yet beloved, and always remembering whose beloved you are. God bless each and every one of you.